Hey y'all, welcome back to Seeing What Sticks. As always, I am the Jonathan Wall. So today's episode comes to us from a customer who came into the store that I work at. I was sitting at our back counter talking to one of my coworkers about the show, and we were just kind of bouncing ideas off each other, and I was writing a few of them down. And she kind of comes up and she says, I was listening to y'all talk and I had an idea. And I said, let me hear it. And she said, what if people got to decide whether or not they could breathe underwater or they could fly? And I said, that's amazing. So, flying or breathing underwater, does it stick? Let's find out. And thank you, random customer. I didn't get your name, but you are certainly a sweetheart. This video goes out to you. So, humans who can breathe underwater or fly. And I assume she meant fly like Superman, not fly like grow wings. But I also assumed breathe underwater like you can just suck water into your mouth, not stick gills out. But who knows? That would be really interesting if you took either direction. Now, I know this story has a lot of superhero vibes to it. I mean, we're talking about people gaining amazing powers. He can fly like Superman, he can swim like Aquaman. But we're not talking about one or two individuals here. We're talking about just about everyone in the story with this ability. And because they can only choose between one of two, that basically creates two different types of people. Those who can fly and those who can breathe underwater. Flyers or swimmers. Air or sea. And I feel that would be more of a social commentary as opposed to a superhero tale. Because superhero stories are all about people who become extraordinary, who gain abilities no one else has. And so they do things no one else can do. It's often that they fight crime because the cops can't stop the bad guy. Or the criminal is a super villain. They have abilities that the cops can't handle, that the army can't handle. And it's this super duper character who has the right stuff to defeat this bad guy. But if everyone could swim, or if everyone could fly, or half the population can swim, half the population can fly, well, then that just becomes a norm. And in fact, society will be built around that norm. In certain ways, of course. You'd have people who have swimming pools inside their houses because they can live underwater, who live in fish bowls, who live in fish tanks, who never leave the water at all because they probably don't have to. Or you've got people who live in these gigantic tree houses, who live at the tops of these amazing towers because they can fly. But this does lead to an interesting question. And this is a question of discrimination. You know, is it discrimination if the person who can fly lives in a tower, at the top of a tower perhaps, but doesn't have a way to get down to the ground without flying? There's no ladder, there's no stairs, there's no elevator. Are they discriminating against the people who cannot fly? And vice versa. If somebody lives underwater because they can breathe underwater, and all of their belongings are just at the bottom of a tank, is it discrimination if the people who can't breathe underwater can't get inside? Can businesses be pro water or pro air? You know, can you have a bank at the top of a mountain that only the flying type of people can get to? Or a grocery store at the bottom of a river or the bottom of a lake that only the swimming types can get to? I mean, obviously there's going to be some sort of social clash between people who can swim or people who can fly. I mean, imagine someone who's flying just hovering over a pool of water and taking a piss, and the person who's lives in that water comes out and just shakes his fist like, "Oh, what the fuck are you doing?" Now, I can definitely see a social divide here between the people who fly and the people who swim, especially if you're the person who lives underwater because you can breathe underwater. You have to breathe that water in. Therefore, the water has to be clean. It can't be dirty. It can't be overly chlorinated. and it can't be polluted, obviously. But we pollute water all the time in the real world with factory runoff, with pesticides, with just lead in the pipes. It takes far more work to get the water to be at livable conditions than to build a tower high up in the air, which is honestly not even a requirement. The people who can fly can live on the ground. They can just fly. What they actually have an advantage because if you choose to fly, you don't need a car. I mean, maybe you need a car to move things, but to get to and fro, you don't need a car. The people who swim, the people who can breathe underwater, they are living in more precarious conditions. And the people who can fly may take advantage of that. They may disregard the water people by just pissing in their water, by letting their septic tanks run into their living space. I mean, there could just be rampant pollution, and the people who live in water could be disenfranchised. You know, and you could possibly take that sort of spin on the story if it's not people who choose how to fly or how to choose whether to fly or swim, but are born into it, which would create a sort of class system. Imagine if the people who fly are the well-to-do, richy-bitchy, white-collar Wall Street types who have all the advantages. And the people who are born into breathing underwater are the ones who are often poor, lower middle class. If we're talking about America, more than likely they are a minority, and they get the short end of it because they are living in these conditions that are more precarious, but not as well managed. But that may be going a bit off topic. The customer who gave me this idea said that people get to choose. So if they get to choose whether or not they get to fly or to swim, is it their fault if they decide to live underwater and breathe underwater and the water is not suitable for them because they chose to have that power instead of um, picking how to fly? I don't know. I honestly just don't know. It really does depend, I guess, on how you want to take the story. Um, but I guess we might as well just ask ourselves, does it stick? And my answer is possibly. I honestly don't know with that one. When it comes to people gaining extra powers, like superpowers, it's often a few individuals or just one person who becomes better than everyone else, who gains power, and that power is sort of the driving force of the story. Do they use it for good? Do they use it for evil? What is their responsibility since they can do more than everyone else? But this idea has everybody gaining some power at some point. And when everyone is super, well, nobody really is. So you have to take a social approach to it. And the second half of this whole idea is the choosing part. If you were born into a certain situation, then it's easier to make a social commentary on that because there's obviously a wealth gap in America between the rich and the poor. And often, whether you're rich or poor is largely determined by your lineage. You're born into a rich family. You've lived your whole life in a rich neighborhood. You've got connections. You've got resources. Your uncles, brothers, cousins, nephews, best friend is a Wall Street broker. He got you the job. A lot of nepotism, a lot of, favors. You've got inheritance. You've got the heirs to fortunes and, it's not about what you know, but who you know, that kind of shit. Whereas if you're born poor, you don't have a lot of resources. Your family can't put you through school. Your family can't get you a good job. Your family can't um raise you up from that poverty. It's a rare thing for a poor person to become rich. And it's a rare thing for a rich person to become poor. It doesn't usually happen like that. Often, if you start off rich, you will continue to be rich. If you start off poor, you will continue to be poor and maybe move up to middle class or middle class. So we're talking about everybody having special abilities, which doesn't make them special because everyone has them. And we're talking about people choosing which ability, but as we've seen, one power has more disadvantages than the other power. Now, I know I've been talking this whole time about the people who can breathe underwater living underwater, which does not have to be the case. They can live above ground on dry land, just like the people who choose how to fly don't have to live in a tower. They can live at ground level, but still choose to fly. But even if both people who fly and people who breathe underwater live on dry land at the ground level, like most people do nowadays, picking the ability to breathe underwater still has more disadvantages than advantages, because you have to breathe the water that you're in. What if we can't breathe in salt water? What if it has to be clean water? What if the clean water, the fresh water, isn't actually fresh? What if it's toxic? What if it's polluted? What if it's sewage water? Your ability to use that power is greatly limited. But there are practically no limits when it comes to people who fly. Unless you add extra limits like, oh, you can only fly if you weigh so much, or you can only carry so much. But if you don't put any restrictions like that, the sky's the limit, as they say. And with that sort of situation in mind, we're talking about people being able to choose which power they want. If they actually take both powers into consideration, you would think that most people would just pick flying to begin with. So, flying or the ability to breathe underwater. Does it stick? I find it debatable. I mean, it does have elements of a superhero story, but with a superhero story, you're talking about someone, like one specific person or a group of persons who become better than everyone else. They gain power. And the question is, what should they do with that power? Are they responsible for the people around them because they can do more? Not in this situation, because everybody has a power. It's one power or the other, but everybody has a power. And everybody gets to choose their power. So you can't really say it's a social commentary because you put yourself in one of two situations. Either you can fly or you can breathe underwater. Often when we're talking about social divisions and social commentary and class divisions and, the rich versus the poor, the young versus the old, the black versus the white, you're talking about situations that people can't control. You are born into your place in society. And the commentary is often about, should we treat the poor with respect? Do the rich deserve as much as they have? What are the impacts of treating minorities like this or like that? Whereas, if you get to just pick your situation, then you're basically there of your own accord. Yes, you can't breathe in polluted water if you choose the water-breathing ability, but you chose to breathe underwater. If you live in an area that has bad water, and you know that the water is bad, you still chose to breathe underwater. And the same can be true for flying. Like, if you're afraid of heights, and you chose to fly instead of swim, again, that's your fault. But, I don't know. There's a lot of creative people out there. Maybe you can make it work. That's why I think that I'm kind of on the fence about it, but I'm not going to outright say that it's perfect or that it sucks. It's kind of wishy-washy. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And if you have any ideas for my next episode, please leave those down below as well. I'll mention your idea, and I'll mention you as well. Alright, see y'all.